Have you had any conversations with the former president, Donald Trump, about a potential run, and what has he said to you about it?
Yeah, I think President Trump and we have had some texts, but the truth of the matter is we're not talking about politics. We're talking about the issues that are important overall.
That was South Carolina Senator Tim Scott in Iowa, alongside the state's Governor Kim Reynolds in Iowa yesterday. Scott has been making moves to jump into the race. Yesterday, he made multiple stops in the First in the Nation caucus state as a part of his Faith in America listening tour. So far, he seems to be staying away from attacking Donald Trump. CBS News political director Finn Gomez joins us now. Thank you, Finn, as always. So is this a good strategy for Tim Scott to play nice with Donald Trump?
Well, right now, I mean, he essentially has to because it's so early, and he hasn't jumped in. He's doing this listening tour to these early states, Iowa, as you mentioned yesterday. But sources familiar with Scott's thinking that I spoke to today say this is about his brand. He's really trying to deliver this message of hope and optimism. Yesterday, he talked about this new American sunrise, new leaders who lift us up, not tear us down. It is about finding that space, that contrast, not only between Donald Trump, but potentially the rest of the Republican field, or a big part of the Republican field, the potential Republican field. So that's part of it. They also say this is part of his authenticity, who he is, and if you ask any of his Senate colleagues, they would say the same thing.
Right. So everyone's trying to stand out right now. It is interesting that of the people who have formally announced, or who we think will announce, you have a son and a daughter of South Carolina. So what do you think the matchup would be like for Tim Scott and Nikki Haley? Because, you know, obviously they are both have such deep roots there.
Yeah, and that's a great question because, I mean, they both come from South Carolina. You know, usually the person who's from South Carolina, when they come back along the cycle, along the primary calendar to the South Carolina, usually the third, of course, in that calendar schedule, they have a home court advantage, if you will. This is a little bit different. It's muddled. There are two. They both come from the same traditional conservative wing of the Republican Party. So sometimes they're fighting for the same supporters, the same political resources, the same South Carolina supporters who supported both of them. So there's some of that. We saw that with Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio in 2016. However, there's enough sources that I've spoken to familiar with these two, and their thinking, say that there's enough space between the lane that they're in, the lanes respectively that they're in, that they could generate momentum through that lane. So,
well, that is exactly what Jeff Kaufman told us. He is the Iowa's GOP chair, and I want to ask you about something he said that, you know, about the DNC. He criticized the DNC for changing who gets to go first, kicking Iowa out of that top spot. He claims just to help President Biden. What do your sources tell you about that?
Yeah, I spoke to some Democratic strategists about that specifically that notion that this was done to help one candidate, President Biden. They say that's not the case. They said it's laughable. Frankly, this was done primarily for two reasons. They say the lack of diversity among Iowa caucus goers compared to other early states, and two, frankly, because the second reason with Iowa is that not only does that happen in the sense that, but the sources that I was speaking to say that it's also because the Iowa Democrats completely bungled this up. You know, this happened. You know, initially it was. Who was it? Was it Buttigieg? Was it Bernie Sanders who won the caucus? And we didn't find out till days later, 16 days, and it changed. But also, this happened with the Republicans in 2012, right? We thought initially it was Mitt Romney who won. We ended up finding out that it was Rick Santorum who won. So,
yes, we all remember those nights very well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Finn.